Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Thriving Adoptees podcast. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by a Brit. We haven't had any Brits on for ages. It's all been Americans and Canadians. But Jo North, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's so nice to be with you.
So, Jo is a psychotherapist. That's what that's right. And she's out the south of England. I used to have some cousins not too far away from you in Salcombe. You're in Exeter, right?
Yeah.
On the south coast. And you're a psychotherapist. You've been in practice quite a few years.
35 years.
35 years.
Yeah.
And you also run a listening group. I love the idea of a listening group.
Yeah. So we call it our Adults Affected by Adoption Listening Group. And which is a lovely opportunity for people just to talk about their experiences and get heard and express their views and tell us their stories. So it's a nice opportunity.
Yeah. And she also does a lot of great advocacy work, trying to change our system here in the UK and trying to get government to listen to what adoptees' needs are. So I thank you for doing that. So what comes to your mind when you hear the name of the podcast, Thriving Adoptees, Jo?
Thriving Adoptees. I think it's a lovely, I love that word. You know, thriving just suggests that we're doing well. And I think what I think is, what does it take for people to thrive? And I work at both ends of the spectrum. So I work with children who have been adopted with their families, and I work at the other end of the spectrum with people who have been adopted and when they're adults. And so I kind of have spent a long time observing and understanding and working with. Actually, I worked it out the other day. It's 14,000 clients I've seen over those years. Quite a few, isn't it? I just thought to myself, oh, I hope I've learned something. But I think if I have learned something, it would be that what helps people to thrive is that they feel really heard and that they feel really understood, and that people are listening to them, and that they're not being judged negatively. And if we want to see people grow and feel happy, we'll see that when they're heard and listened to and accepted and supported. And a lot of research in helping people to thrive points to support. And so do you know what it takes for people to thrive is really simple things. It doesn't cost money. It takes time, attention, and the willingness to be there and to really value seeing people grow and flourish. Yeah. So that's what I think when I hear the name of Thriving Adoptees. I think, let's do that.
Yeah. So as I wrote down the comments that you mentioned, like feeling heard, feeling understood, not being judged, being accepted, and supported, that to me feels like it's all about the adoptees' view of the outside world rather than a view of themselves.
I think that's true, but if you think about it, I mean, if you look at both ends of the spectrum, if you look at children, they're very dependent on the care around them. They're very dependent on the quality of great care. When you're growing up, let's call, I don't know, what, 18, 25. I think growing up is over 25, because that's when your brain was really developed. You're kind of responsible for forming your own ideas about who you are and how you want to be. And when you're a teenager, somewhere in between, it's a bit of both. But I think you're right. It does depend on others, but I think when we're autonomous and individual, we choose for ourselves. But I think, Simon, that adults we don't exist in a vacuum. We do need feedback from others. We do need others guiding us, telling us, supporting us. And that's why people like you running these podcasts is great, because it gives people an opportunity to have advice and support and listen to views that guide them. We don't work in that. I think it's a mistake in life to work in too much of a vacuum.
Yeah. I'm going to have to think about that one.
Oh, great. Thank you for thinking about what I'm saying.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Does it sound like, is it not where you're at? Maybe tell.
Well, yeah. I'll give you perhaps an analogy, or tell you a different story, and then maybe it'll be clearer. So I was talking to a researcher, perhaps in your neck of the woods, down the south coast of England, and about research around adoptees. And we were talking about, because some people look at compare adoption trauma to complex PTSD, right? So this was a trauma researcher, PTSD researcher I was talking. And I said to this researcher, so what's the difference that makes the difference then? And she reeled off a whole list of different differences that make the difference. And because what we were talking about was how many of people that go through a potentially traumatic, or go through a traumatic experience, get PTSD, right? Because it's not 100%. It depends on whose figures you count and stuff, and all the definitions, but it's somewhere between 10 and 20% get PTSD. So, but when she said, she talked, it was all about the external thing. It was all about the support after the event. And I said, well, that's very interesting. That's very interesting. And those are all external factors. What about the internal characteristics, resilience, whatever you want to call it? What about the internal aspects of the person that's been through the traumatic stress event? And she went quiet, and she didn't have any answers. And I thought, that's very interesting. I'm not so sure. Yeah. So that's what I mean. What the internal, the internal. So the internal stuff would be a strong sense of identity, is one that often comes up. So I've had two names. I was David Anthony Flower, then I was Simon Jonathan Ben. I've had two names. Is it any wonder that some people get a bit confused about identity when they've had two names, right? So on that level, identity is a many-leveled beast. But so feeling heard is something that other people do. They listen to me. That's an external thing. A strong sense of identity. Well, that's something that I build myself, presumably on the foundations. Yes, on the foundations of others as a child. But if I'm a grown up, and I'm 56, I'm still not sure whether I count as a grown up. Right? But it's that self stuff, really.
No, I absolutely. I mean, what you're talking about is, I think, is we have an internal world and we have an external world, and there are factors in the external world that help us a lot. And what you're saying is, we also build on an internal world, but really, it depends on our sense of a secure sense of ourselves. And building identity is actually quite a complex matter. That's complex, whether it's really complex when you're adopted, but it's complex for young people to grow into that process anyway. But but a lot of work on adoption by psychologists is based around attachment theory and the way that infants are supported and attached by another, by a secure attachment figure, and that's all the work of John Bowlby. I think that this brings in the idea with adoption, or the experience whereby, like, what that there was a rupture in that initial attachment that has to somehow be soothed and resolved and recovered from. And it's always there, I mean, you'll know better than me, but I know from all those clients that I've seen that some adoptions work well, and people feel soothed and they feel comfortable, and they move on through. They still have questions about their identity, but it's comfortable. Some adoptions, we have to be absolutely straightforward, do not work well. And I end up working mostly with those, and it makes life what is a complex situation of a ruptured attachment that then has to be somehow resolved and mended and smoothed over and made to feel comfortable and untraumatic. Those things form part of your internal world that you're talking about, that we build on. And it's absolutely great if you've got people around you who are going to help you with that. And it's absolutely, but it doesn't mean that if you haven't got people around you to help you with that, you're not going to be okay, because there's lots of things that can help us. You might, am I going down the right road for you here,
Yeah,
Simon?
go for it. Yeah.
Okay, is that making sense? I mean, so a lot of the research, I mean, Bowlby's work was absolutely profound and lawful. I mean, nobody's going to argue with the importance of attachment. But we also know that our social learning plays a huge part in our development. It can play a huge part in helping us feel secure. So a child might, say, go to school and find a really secure experience in the school, or a really secure experience around friends, or later might go into a job that helps them feel absolutely good about themselves. It's not, and I think this fits in with what you're saying, Simon. All is not lost if there's nobody there supporting you. That the social world can help us find, we can earn or learn our security. And like all that research on adult attachment and inner security didn't actually ever focus on adopted people, because it all took place 20 or 30 years ago. Nobody was really that kind of focused on it. But what the figures came up with were, like, you'll have to forget any experts listening, or don't bother telling me off for these statistics, but I know that roughly about 49% of any given population are going to be secure. And so, like, what about the rest of us then? What are we all doing? It's like we're all finding it I mean, I wouldn't have been part of that population. I understand insecurity very well at an internal level, but everyone else, we find it in other ways. So I don't know if that fits really with what you're trying to say. I hope it helps, Simon.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's that book, isn't there? Have you read the Oprah Winfrey and Bruce Perry book about It's Not What's Wrong With You, It's What Happened to You? And it's just they talk trauma, but it's okay because there's neuroplasticity, and then you go trauma. And I listened to that book for 8 hours. I thought, when are they going to get to the point? Like it's 8 hours of 8 hours of saying it's not what happened to you. It's not what's wrong with you. It's what happened to you. Yes, but you can say that in one sentence. The big thing is, okay, the neuroplasticity thing is right. Okay, so the brain is plastic, which means it will change. There is the hope. There is the hope if we're thinking that brain power somehow links to security. We can learn. We can change it up. We can change it up when we have when we have a different relationship, when we meet somebody that shows us gives us some hope.
Yeah.
Right. The point of thriving adoptees is that we are. I coined this a couple of years ago: trauma informed but hope obsessed. The adoptee community is somewhat trauma obsessed. The adoption community, the adoption industry in the US and the adoption sector in the UK, because it's a slightly different thing, they're pretty much trauma obsessed as well. And I think we should be hope obsessed.
I absolutely agree with you. And I also, say nearly every day, if you've had trauma in your life, don't use that as an excuse to fail. You use it to to be better. That's a little bit of a tough way of saying it, but I also I work a lot with trauma. I'm trained in EMDR and thinking about this. I wrote my doctoral thesis in the subject, so it's not like I don't know anything about that. But my experience, the things before my eyes tell me this: that trauma can be healed in the here and now, in the things we do in the here and now. So, for example, you can have, if you look after yourself really well. Yeah. If you put your own needs first, if you take your thoughts seriously, and if you, do something every day that makes your life okay, then you are healing. You're very possibly healing trauma. Like, I'm not going to say, all trauma can be healed that way, but I would say you can build on a healing life and a healing experience. Yeah. And I say to people, I work with a lot with adopted people, but children in care, so children who have had absolutely, really, really sort of very complex lives, very failed experiences, and I say to them this, and I say this to every child I talk to. It's like, I know it's a difficult story, but it's your story, and it will always belong to you. And you've got to value it. Let it be what it is, with all of its ups and downs and difficulties. And we all, at the end of the day, healing is about, you used the word, as soon as I spoke to you, you were using the word resolved. You love that, you like that word. I live by that word. How do we help you resolve this? And really, a lot of the time I'm helping people say that, yeah, this is the deal. How do we sit with this? How do we own it? And how do we decide we're gonna do it?
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Because I'm very aware, Simon, that I'm talking I'm talking in my field, as a very experienced person, but I'm not an adopted person. I'm always kind of like pretty, got a bit of humility about that. I don't know that lived experience, but I've certainly heard about it and learned a lot from it.
Yeah. Humility is a great thing, right? I think we could all do with a shot more humility. And humility is kind of like, sometimes it's daring to be wrong. As you were talking about, looking after ourselves, we're talking whole mind body system stuff, aren't we? We're like
yeah.
We both went to get some water. You said, I'm going to get some water. I thought, that's a good idea. I better go and get some water. I have too much caffeine and not enough water. But I do a lot of exercise and try and get to bed early and get my good sleep. All these things put us in a better frame of mind. One of the things, so I'm totally with you on that. One of the things that I mentioned before we started was what stops us thriving, and I gave you the example of my own belief. So this thought came to me at 40. She didn't love me enough to keep me. This is my birth mother. She didn't love me enough to keep me, and it came with a bang into my consciousness. I've never thought that thought before, and it came with a lot of loaded with a lot of feelings. And the person I was chatting to, she questioned it. Well, she didn't question it. She gave her opinion, and we were I had enough. I saw enough empathy from her that I didn't. When she just said, "I'm a mum, Simon. I'm not sure if it would be like that." So she gave her opinion, but couched it quite gently, and I saw the truth in that, right? So she gently challenged my perception with her perception, and that took the wind out of the sails of that belief. And a few years later, I found out categorically that my belief that my birth mother didn't love me enough to keep me, and I won't use the swear words that I used before we started recording. There's that thing that, so I see a fundamental block to my own thriving is it was this belief. Yeah. And you mentioned taking our thoughts seriously, and I was just thinking, well, how do those two things sit together?
Yeah. Thanks, and it's a great, it's a beautiful example. Thank you. I've got to say, it's a belief that I've come across so much, and what I have always found, I think I said to you, in the work that I did in helping people reconnect, we did 1,000 searches, 1,000 pieces of intermediary work, and I've got to say, in all of that work, I never did meet one mum who didn't want their child. If there was one, there might have been 0.5%, but it was so tiny. What I did meet was a lot of people saying exactly what you're saying, exactly. And you know what I think you were saying? You said that as a teenager, yeah. I was meeting people who said that at 20, 30, 40, and 50.
No, I said that at 40.
You said that at 40, oh bless 40, you. 40. Yeah. So what we would do is that we get files, and we'd get the facts, and what I'd always say to people is a big difference between what you believe to be true and the facts of what are true. And I think the facts, the actual facts, which are written down on an adoption file, which you are saying you found out, are what I have found them to be incredibly healing for people. Yeah, it blows that negative assumption out of the water. I mean, actually, I say to people, never mind about, you had the negative assumption. Of course you did. Why would you formulate any other thought? Why would you say, oh, she gave me away, she must have been so happy? You wouldn't say that, would you? So that, I would say, is what made me so committed to birth records and making sure that they were available for people, and to encouraging people to to find that. Now, I know you're very much on, like, we have to do that in ourselves, but and that's why I kind of say to you, we do need others to guide us sometimes, to help us through a little bit. So it was great that you had someone who would take your negative belief and who wouldn't sort of judge you for it, but would say, I wonder if, I wonder if, and I don't know if you ever got your birth record, Simon, but I guess you would have got the facts in the end. There's a big difference between what we believe, what we feel, the thoughts that come into our mind, and actually what the facts are.
Yeah.
And a lot of people go in search of facts for that very reason.
And that's why the kind of the third party view. So the third party, the gentle exchange of perspective, sharing, questioning of beliefs. That third party is kind of so important, because one of my mentors, and is the reason that I do this, because of something that he said. So it's hard to see the picture when we're in the frame. This self. I just chatted to for another episode of the podcast, a transracial adoptee from China or Korea, Asian adopted in America, and she had a belief about her birth mother and her abandonment for 16 years. So between the age of 4 and 20, she told herself that she wasn't bright enough or good looking enough or something enough. She wasn't enough to be kept. And then something happened, and that belief was questioned. And the reason I'm going on about some of this is because I'm hoping that the listeners might think, okay, are my beliefs worth another look, or some of my beliefs worth another look?
Well, absolutely. I mean, I really like your comment about, you can't see the picture if you're in the frame, and it's a good way to look at it. And but I think it's true for being a human being.
Yes.
Yeah. I love that it's true for people that are adoptees, but also, us humans, we've got this cognitive brain, and it works us if we're not careful. And I don't know anyone who's had a bit of therapy or gone for any sort of psychological help, that they might be advised to have cognitive behavioral therapy. The whole basis of cognitive behavioral therapy is like, are you sure your thoughts aren't kind of like leading you down the wrong road here? It might be what that expression, false evidence appearing real, FEAR. So it's very commonly used. And I'm so that I work with a lot of models of psychotherapy, and it's probably my great strength is to understand all those different models. But really, a facet of being human is to check those thoughts out. Check those assumptions out. Don't be careful they're not holding you back. And that's why things like, as your podcast do help people to thrive, because our thoughts can be we can overthink stuff. We have a saying in ACT, psychotherapy, acceptance and commitment therapy, which is a very modern therapy, that your brain can be over helpful. It's trying to be your friend, but it's over helpful, and it forms ideas that may just not be quite accurate.
Yeah.
Does that help, Simon?
It does. I think what memories coming back to me is, like, I read a book and I listened to a few audiobooks as well on emotional intelligence maybe 15 years ago. It seems to have gone out of vogue, hasn't it, emotional intelligence? But maybe it'll be back. It'll be, the consultants will have to rebrand it, with something else, because they have to say, yeah. If they say this is how it works, right? Because I used to sell to corporates, you need something new, right? Because if unless you've got something new, then the head of training says, we don't need that. We're already doing that. So you've got to give them something new. But emotional intelligence, it starts with us, right? If you do an emotional intelligence questionnaire, or you read an emotional intelligence book, or you listen to an emotion, the first chapter, the first part is all about us. It starts with us. Any relationship starts with us. We've got far more agency over ourselves than we have over other people, which is why I get sometimes very concerned about adoptees. I see some adoptees, it feels to me like they're waiting for the world to change before they they're trying to change the world when they need to do their.
Well, I think it's the kind of bit of flawed thinking again, isn't it? It's just like, God, good Lord, how long is it going to take to change the world? We have to be, when we can be so alive now
Yeah.
in every moment. And I think if you focus on modern therapies, it's very focused on now.
Yeah.
What's going on now? What's your lived experience of the world? And what's your felt sense of your life now?
Yeah.
I know you said to me when we were just chatting, and you said, emotions are really important, and I absolutely am with you. I sit down with people every day and I just say to myself, what are we feeling here? What's this felt sense of life for you? And that it rarely takes us in the wrong place. We need to explore our inner world and our feelings, and we need to value that. I really I love your cynicism on, oh, well, okay, we'll probably have to repackage it and sell it and I kind of love your cynicism, but I kind of I feel, there's nothing new about a felt sense. Our developing sophistication and felt sense of the world. There's nothing new. I mean, it's been around,
Yeah.
as part of evolution for millennia. So, how many packages are we going to have before we just get this whole thing and start accepting?
I'm talking about, I'm bringing something from another part of my life into this conversation that probably isn't valid. So I shouldn't have probably brought that in, Joe. What do you see as the things that stop? So the things that stop adoptees thriving. So I've given you one example. The one example I've given you is from me, my belief that I wasn't. She didn't love me enough to give me. So
well, and I think I do thank you for that. I genuinely see people talk to me and say to me, can you understand me? Do I make sense to you? And if I reflect back to them, sense, yes, you do. Is my experience valid? Am I crazy? Is my experience valid? And we together we reflect back. Of course you're not crazy. You've had a different set of experiences. Your life, you've got this unique kind of life, this unique mind of an adopted person, unique attachment experience. So it's just going to be a little bit different. That doesn't mean you're different from other human beings, actually. We're all part of the same human race. It means that you've got the unique set of characteristics of an adopted person. So I mean, I genuinely see that if and I know I really get that, you're focused on people, like, help yourself. But if people, you don't have to give people a lot of understanding for them to really start running through it. Really feeling like you say empowered, like this is me. I've got a woman in my adopted adults group, and she is beautiful. She has a transracial adoption, a pretty complex upbringing, all the rest of it. You know what she says every time we meet? She says, I really love being me. And we all go, oh God, well, she's made it then, hasn't she? I think when you can look at yourself and say, I absolutely love who I am, I love being me, I am not perfect, then you've cracked it. And for this, again, for that particular person, complicated adoption story, complicated reunion story, complicated birth family story, whatever. So she says, never mind, I love being me. Well, she helps us all every time she says it.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Good thing, isn't it? I love that.
Ask her if she wants to be on the podcast. I love that. Yeah.
Oh, do you know what? You really want her on your podcast. She's so super. She's blogged on my blog. She's written a lovely thing about transracial adoption, and she's talked about, because she's got a fro hairdo, and she sort of says, well, try going into the class with a fro hairdo, and see how you do. she loves being her. So I'll ask her to come on your podcast.
That'd be great. We need more Brits listeners. If there's more Brits listening, I think like 68% of the audience are in the States. I know.
Well, that's wonderful. Yeah, sure, that's wonderful. Why's that? How does that happen?
Well, we'll talk about that off after the
okay.
Sorry, I threw a diversionary tactic in there.
That's right. I'm easily diverted, Simon.
So yeah, one of the you've got a lot of experience. 14, if you've had 14,000 clients and you've helped, and you and your colleagues have helped 1,000 adoptees and people in this intermediary service, the reconnections and reunions and stuff. One of the other, does anything else come to mind in terms of what stops us thriving, or what stops us feeling like the client that you just mentioned? She loves being her.
She loves being her. Confidence, and a very deep acceptance of ourselves as we are. A very thorough embracing of this is me. And it takes a little bit of time. We have to sit down and think for a little bit about who is me. Take a little bit of reflective time. One thing I will tell you about that particular lady I'm talking about, and I think she'll tell you herself, is that she does do a mindfulness practice or a meditation practice. Yeah. Now I think that can help you just take a little time each day to sit with yourself, whoever you are, however you are, all those thoughts, whatever the flavor, whatever, whether they're troubles or whatever, and just, accept your life in its entirety. I think that's a wonderful thing. And don't be distracted from who you are. Don't let the world tell you can't be this or you can't be that. I always use the example of a very personal example would be like, okay, so I got a doctorate in psychotherapy, and I'm a chartered psychologist, and everyone says, well, that's a big deal, whatever. Do you know what? I got 3 GCSEs, right? So that wasn't great. Let's face it. You're not, and I'm always throwing that in. I said, do not tell me you can't do something.
Yeah. So to just translate that for anybody outside of the UK, so GCSEs are the exams. You probably did GCEs.
I did CSEs, Simon. I'm now. I did CSEs, that was kind of. I did some CSEs and I did some GCEs. So it's that you take them when you're 16 and when you leave school.
Yeah. So most people who have got a doctorate would probably have had nine O levels. And probably 5 A's, 4 B's, or something like that. You don't. So these are the exams that you take at 16. So what Joe's saying is that somehow you turned it around from a lower than well. What happened was you just weren't engaged by that, or did something change? What was it?
I had a very itinerant life. I mean, I moved schools a lot, and I was, basically pretty lost. I was 16. I was probably in love, to be fair. And I thought life was terribly interesting, but I didn't think schooling was very interesting. And I think suddenly I took my own brain seriously.
Yeah.
And I was my own best coach. And I got beside myself. I got behind myself. I said, which is what you have to do. You have to believe in yourself. And so, like, for adoptees, please, let's have you believing in yourself, in your unique self. Let's have you. Come on. No.
Yeah. What do you mean by self? What do you mean by
well, self? Well, if anyone could give you an absolute definitive version of that, I'd really love to meet them. But I mean, brain, body, life experience, your connection to life, and your felt sense of who you are, your abilities, your vulnerabilities, your failures, your inabilities, your strengths and your weaknesses, your likes, your dislikes, your choices, your values are the core of who you are, what you value in life. And if you're living by those, then you feel good.
That's a
Um,
big list, Joe.
it's
I'm
a big list. Just and I tell you what, you keep talking because I need to go and get my plug and plug my battery in.
okay. So she's on a laptop, going to be running out of charge here. I think just filling in while Joe gets her laptop charger. I think there's a long list of the me thing, and normally I try and scribble stuff down, but I didn't bother that. You were so fluid. You had so many. I think the big thing is to join two parts of two of your stories together. Our past does not determine our future. So Joe's less than stellar performance at 16 was completely blown her out of the water, and you turned it around to then go on to do a bachelor's degree and then a master's after that. And the transracial adoptee with the tricky past has somehow found it within herself to turn it around, and now she loves every part of being her.
Yeah,
So
thank you.
yeah, the past doesn't determine the future. And I'd say another one for me off the back of that is, or similar sort of thing, is we're not our story, right? We're not our story. We're bigger. We're bigger than that, and we are, and we're not the story that we tell ourselves. We're not. We're that inner critic. We're the one that hears the inner critic. The inner critic isn't us. The inner critic is a set of beliefs that maybe we've taken in subconsciously. We've sucked up. Like as kids, maybe you can flesh that out with a bit more.
Well, yeah, I think what you're saying is absolutely vital, and it's really plugs into a lot of, if you're working in adoption field in the UK now, we're big on story, yeah, and so we're quite big on life story work for children. But I completely. I mean, also in psychotherapy, we're big on what we call the storage brain. We basically say our brains like stories, and really our brain likes a good story with a beginning, a middle, and an end. But you see, also what our brains are, we're very capable of perspective, and it's the perspective on that story, and every story has new chapters, and every story has new volumes, and every story, you can rewrite the story. Exactly as you say, you can rewrite the story. So, and I always say this, the story you might tell yourself when you're 10 is going to be completely different from the story you tell yourself when you're 30, and then completely different again from the story when you're 60. So it's just like back to that sort of flexibility. It's just like, and I think in relation to story, Simon, it's just like keep reviewing. Feel free to review your story and see if there's changes and edits you want to make. It's yours. Review the story. Are you judging yourself? Are you judging yourself excessively? Are you judging others? Have you got is the information accurate? Do you want to go and find out more about that? So just stories are big. Stories are big to kids. I mean, we take a 3-year-old, we start telling them a story, and they go, "Whoa, that's interesting." They love that. And something in our brains goes, something in our neuroscience, I love that beginning, middle, and end. We kind of like happy ever after.
Yeah,
don't we? We love happy ever after, but we write that in. we choose. I'm going to have this. It was here's Little Red Riding Hood going through the forest, and the big bad wolf comes in, but I've decided I'm having a happy ending.
Yeah, nice one. I like that. So there's a distinction there between the life story work, which is the facts behind the adoption history. So that's just the facts, madam. And then there's the story that we tell ourselves. And the other thing that I hear a lot about is people saying you've got to share your story, and I think, yeah, and then my brain goes in, but what if what if I had started sharing this story about my birth mother not loving me enough to keep me? What if I'd gone around? I shared that. I shared that thought as it came to me in the moment with Sarah, who I was chatting to. She was a trainer on a course, and she questioned that. If she hadn't questioned that, if she'd gone along with that, and I'd kept on, I'd had this self-reinforcing, the same story, and I'd kept on, I'd filling more pages in my notebook with that story, my mental notebook, and carrying that on, then I would have got myself in. I would have written myself into a very dodgy place, and that's when I get a slight. Oh, I like this word, frisson. It's a French word. I don't know, like shiver, right? A slight shiver when I see anybody saying adoptees tell your stories, because I think, what if I had gone out and shared my story, and she didn't love me enough to keep me. She didn't love me enough to keep me. And there's something wrong with me. And I did, and I just kind of plugged away on that story. Yeah. The more times I said it, the more times it would go into my ears, and it would have become a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah, somebody interrupted that for you.
Yeah,
and that was kind of really helpful.
Yeah.
So it's sort of, but that whoever that person was did it in a very thoughtful way.
Yeah.
They didn't say, "Oh, that's a rubbish, you're rubbish. What a stupid thought." Is that they were very thoughtful, and they gave you a chance to rewire that to inspire and rewire it, as we say. You could rewire that thinking. What a blessing was that moment, is all I can say.
Yes.
And it's one of the themes that in my thesis I was looking at. Never mind a therapeutic hour, what about a therapeutic moment?
Yeah.
Yeah. And we can hear one thing that rewires our thinking.
That and it does happen in a moment, and I love that. And then the societal norm, right? I don't know whether it's the same in the States, but we've or in Canada, where else we got, but in the UK, everybody says change is hard, don't they? Or it's change, or it takes a long time. It doesn't. It doesn't. And the analogy I always use on this is, you hang out at the bus stop for new thoughts, and that might be listening to Jo sharing her wisdom, that might be going to see your own therapist, that might be reading a book, whatever it is. But it's like hanging out at the bus stop, but the analogy, the metaphor ends because there's no timetable for insights. Like sometimes the buses are late despite the timetable. There's no timetable for insights, but it happens. It happens in a moment when somebody else gives us a perspective, when we question our own stuff, and when our beliefs are shift. So what's this is a bit of a theme of mine at the moment. So we've got this trauma obsession, right? Everyone's trauma obsession, but we want a hope obsession, and we don't hear a lot about beliefs. So when somebody says trauma to me, I think, that sounds tricky, right? But if somebody says beliefs to me, I say, oh, right, okay. It's going to be easier to bust a belief to rather than to harness the neuroplasticity of my brain. Do you see what I mean? We got this trauma word. Trauma seems difficult. Busting my beliefs seems kind of easier somehow.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, because what I see in the world at the moment is that we're all busy traumatizing each other. I mean, I don't even switch on the news anymore, because it's sort of like there's somebody sitting there who's got a whole list of things they want to tell me that are traumatic about the world. Now, I'm looking after myself. I really value my brain and I value my well-being, so I switch that off. So thank you very much. I really don't need to keep traumatizing myself by being told we're all, all difficult things that I'm not even going to say, because I don't take any pleasure. Somehow we are talking ourselves into a bit of a problem if we're not careful. But we have to, the thing is, brains are made to go to the negatives and check them out. It's a very natural human function to kind of think of the problems and check them out.
And that's what the media are encouraging as well.
As long as you don't get stuck there. Okay, so check out the problems, but then come back and find all those other aspects of the brain, the creativity, the hopefulness, the emotionality, the soothing, and all those wonderful things that our brain is made to dance with. Not just like, oh, let's think of every single problem possible and make like it's going to happen tomorrow. We're a little bit kind of built that way, and that's why in therapy we're talking all the time about flexibility. It's just like, let's let your thoughts be flexible. So so you were flexible in your thinking when you had that thought of potentially that your birth mum didn't want you, but you were open to influence of the other person. And so your thinking was flexible, and you just thought, oh yeah, maybe that's true, So the capacity to be just a bit flexible with our minds is a very, very helpful thing. Yeah. And it's just like, there's a piece of research about what makes a good therapist. And actually, what actually makes a good therapist is a therapist who's a tiny, tiny bit unconfident.
Right.
We don't want to be too stubborn about what's right and what's wrong in our world. We need to be a little bit, curious, and a little bit like, maybe here's you and I talking, we're pretty well on the same page, but I bet there's another page to go to. I bet there's another level to go to on this, somebody else would have a different perspective that would kind of offer us another way to go. So curiosity is a wonderful thing, and implies flexibility. So if you were then able to say to yourself, I wonder why my mum did give me away, rather than, I'm pretty sure she gave me away because she didn't want me, is a very different kind of thought, isn't it?
Yeah. And we had a birth mum on last week, and she said, no, I didn't give my child away, I placed them for adoption. And I said on the last podcast I recorded, I don't normally get hung up with vocabulary, which is kind of a bit weird because I was in publishing for like years and years. So right. I did get hung up on vocabulary, but when it comes to stuff, but with that, for some reason, I guess it's because it's the emotional attachment, maybe.
Yeah.
But I love your idea of flexibility about emotions rather than neuroplasticity. Neuroplasticity, all right, I need a neurosurgeon. I need to inject some neuroplasticity or whatever it is. I need to, but flexibility about our emotions seems far more doable.
Absolutely. I mean, some of these terminologies are just rather cliched, and it's just like, the fact of the matter is that the brain's an ever flowing, ever changing, ever adapting, ever shifting experience of our lives, you know. And what we, you know, to focus on health, we need to be focusing on keeping that flexibility, adaptability, curiosity, you know, finding out more, and checking out what our values are, in, you know, what really matters to us, and living by that.
Yeah.
You
Wow.
know, if you watch children, you watch a 2-year-old, this is my great example, you know, and you watch how they, in one moment they will be cross, within 30 seconds they're pleased, within another minute or two they might be tired and upset and need a rest, and within another minute they might be hungry and need some food. I mean, you know, whoa, keep up with that. That's a brain working, you know.
So me and my wife haven't got any kids, but
No.
I do see a lot of dads with their kids in swimming pool, and yeah. So I see mums and dads with their kids in the swimming pool itself, but dads in the changing room with their kids, and I see that that emotional flexibility, the shifting, ever shifting states of mind that the kids are in. And one of the things that I see there is this soothing.
Yeah.
Right. Sometimes I see a soothing. Sometimes I see a dad at the end of his tether, questioning the kid, trying to use logic to change the kid's emotions, which never seems to work to me. But when I sometimes I see that the soothing stuff, I think, don't we learn that some emotions are unacceptable through that soothing?
Well, you know, on the whole, kids communicate through emotion. They haven't really got their cognitive, you know, they haven't got the lexicon, the words, the, you know, the meaning. It's just like, if they feel it, they're doing it through emotion, and they need to feel accepted. You know, they need to feel that's heard and understood. And that's where, like, my main thesis in life is, like, we're all at heart, we kids that need to be heard and understood, you know. Really, I think what you watch parents do is regulating their children. So, oh, okay, you know, you're unhappy about this. Let's see what we can do. You know, can we sort this? Can we not? Are you going to have to tolerate no? It's a regulation, and really very key to therapy these days is how we regulate ourselves. How are we regulating this continual flow of states? Yeah. How do we control that ourselves? How do we manage that? How do we, in using your word, how do we soothe that? And we do learn that in childhood. And we're very, very fortunate if we have somebody really kind and thoughtful helping us with that.
Yeah.
It's very helpful. But, you know, if we don't, we can learn that. You know, I spend a lot of my time just saying to people, let's learn to just regulate your mind. Let's regulate those emotions. Let's make sure you can settle and calm and soothe.
So I'm conscious of time, and we could talk all day, can't we? Is there anything else that you'd like to share before we bring it in, Jo?
No, I just have loved talking to you. I mean, that's brilliant. I really do like all of your, you know, your thinking and your questioning, your curiosity, and no, I thank you so much for talking with me, and it's a joy to talk to you, and I keep up the great work.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's great having a cheerleader in the camp. You know, thank you. That means a lot to me.
You're welcome.
And yeah, and I'd love to have your the lady that you spoke on. So thank you very much for listening, listeners, and thank you very much to Jo for flying a British flag. We need more Brits on the show. And we will speak to you again very soon. Thanks, Jo. Thank you, listeners.
Bye, everybody. Bye.